Welcome to our lessons on ecosystems. Today we're going to just get a definition of what an ecosystem is and take a look at some of the local ecosystems here in Northern California to understand how they kind of work together. Well, let's first of all talk about the organization of ecosystems. Let's kind of first of all work off some kind of description. So that's what we're going to try to pull off first, is as we kind of deconstruct an ecosystem, try to understand how we would describe an ecosystem. Second of all, we want to take a look at the structure. What makes up a good ecosystem? What are kind of the components of it? Thirdly, what we'd like to look at is the relationship between ecosystems and biomes. A lot of people will interchange those words, but really when we're looking at an ecosystem, it's made up of a subsets of biomes. And the other thing we're going to take a look at, of course, is what do humans provide as far as impacts on ecosystem structure. There are man-made types of ecosystems. We're going to look at those as well. So that's what we're trying to accomplish in today's lesson. But first of all, let's take a look at some of the types in the United States. There are coastal and oceanic types of ecosystems. Obviously, there are coastal areas on west and east and southern borders. We have quite a few of those. And then recently they've been coming under a lot of study because of hurricanes and pollution, those kinds of things. We also have farmlands. There's a type of man-made ecosystem. It's relatively, we consider it a monoculture, if you will. Not a lot of diversity in that, but it's still a huge part of our ecosystems in the United States. Then we have forests. We have, of course, the coniferous forests. We have the deciduous forests. We have oak woodland forests. We have riparian forests. So we have quite a few of those types of forests, not only in California, but also across the nation. And then the riparian habitats, or freshwater marshes, those kinds of things, wetland areas. All of those are kind of broken down into biomes, but basically we're talking about an ecosystem of fresh water. And then grassland and scrublands. Here in California we have the chaparral. We also have prairies and different kinds of grasslands here in California as well as across the nation. That would give us kind of a subset of the ecosystems. And then, of course, all the development we have in California and across the nation, we have urban as well as suburban areas. They also have some type of impact, and they would be considered an ecosystem type in the United States. So, what is an ecosystem description? Here's one of them. It's an assemblage or grouping of plants and animals, and of course microbes as well. Can't forget the microbes because they play a huge role in impacting the quality and type of ecosystems on our planet. So that was the biotic community description. But if we look at species just in general, it really says the different diversity of the different kinds of plants and animals and microbes in a community. So when we look at from a species point of view, we're looking at diversity. And then the population really refers to the number of individuals that will make up what we call an interbreeding or reproducing group. As those numbers begin to shrink in our ecosystems, then we tend to see some crossbreeding in some locations. So it does change and has an impact on the ecosystem. And then if we look at purely a description from associations, we're trying to look at how biotic communities can fit into the landscape and how each ecosystem would actually impact another. So, how are ecosystems formed? Well, really, when we look at restoration efforts, you just can't put animals out in a particular ecosystem expect to thrive. You have to kind of build it literally from the ground up. So we look at abiotics first. We look at the temperature and the moisture, latitude and longitude, and those kinds of things are important because it will predict the kind of plants that you're going to see in an ecosystem. Once we can predict the kinds of plants, we can also understand what the role moisture plays, as well as temperature plays in supporting the plant life that's going to be there, which eventually will capture the energy, which will then obviously translate into a healthier population of biotic communities, and in particular animal communities. And of course, if we know what kind of plants are there, we can kind of predict the level and the load of the kind of animals that will be there, whether it be secondary or primary animals or probably even tertiary animals. It's really dependent on how much energy we can trap within our plant communities. So if we kind of smash all of those definitions together, we're going to be getting a definition that looks something like this. It's a grouping of plants and animals and microbes that occupy explicit unit of space, or in other words, a very defined space, which interacts with other components within the ecosystem and, of course, their environment. So one more time, it's a group of plants and animals and microbes occupying an explicit unit of space and interacting with each other and, of course, their environment. We're going to use that as our working definition in our AP Environmental Science class. And it's one of these definitions that you probably need to memorize and log in your head as something that we can come back to and use on a regular basis. That brings us to kind of how all these ecosystems kind of work together. And it's important to note that all of the biotic components that are in a community are going to be sharing a lot of the characteristics of the ecosystem. In other words, plant species are going to have similar types of characteristics. And as they interact with the animals and the plants and the abiotic components of an ecosystem, they're going to have certain characteristics that all of them are going to share, and that's what makes them adapt to that particular ecosystem. But it's just not cut and dry as far as here's one ecosystem, here's another ecosystem. We have what we call ecotones, or transitional zones between ecosystems. That's where biomes come into play. In Woodland, California, we live in a biome, or a subset of a forest, basically, of an oak woodland. This oak woodland is kind of like the bedroom community, if you will, of wildlife. It's the place where they go to get shelter. It's a place they go in basically to maybe bed down for the night, where they'll possibly have their young. But during the day and even during the night, they'll maybe come out of that oak woodland area and into grasslands or prairies, or sometimes in the intercoastal to feed or get waters. They may even go to a riparian habitat. Those are transitional areas. And so long as there are good corridors between these particular ecosystems, these ecotones or corridors provide an excellent opportunity for them to move around and go from place to place, depending on their stage of life, depending on their needs, depending on the season. But all ecosystems basically, and ecotones, have very unique conditions that kind of support very distinctive types of life, whether it be plant life, whether it be animal life. So these ecotones play a real crucial role in the health of ecosystems, because they provide that corridor, that opportunity for them to move around and to adapt to their particular surroundings. Now, these transitional zones not only happen in terrestrial ecosystems, but also in aquatic ones as well. If you take a look at this one, same thing applies. They share many of the same species and characteristics, because the abiotic types of factors here have a huge role in it. And then they continue to have very unique specifications so that plants and animals kind of can coexist in this particular environment. Like what we see here is a wetland type of environment, and they have transitional zones as well. Like, for instance, from the floodplains, of course, to the channels themselves, to the banks, and up into the woodland areas as well. All of those kind of are additive into a very healthy ecosystem. Now here's a look of a map that kind of outlines all the ecosystems in California. And it's kind of interesting to note, if we're looking at Woodland, California in particular, we're looking at an area somewhere right about here. We occupy about this space, Yolo County in particular, right about here. And we're kind of in a very unique setting because, like I said before, we're in an oak woodland area, but we're also bordered by grasslands as well. So if you look at 262A, and that is right up here, we're part of the Great Valley of California. This part is, of course, the Sacramento Valley area. And we kind of live on that outside edge of this huge grassland. If we read a lot of John Muir's descriptions of the valley, he said he would walk out there and the grasses would be so thick that he could hardly walk just a few feet. And there were so many wildflowers that were just too many to count. And when the wind would blow, it would be like a big wave in the ocean. So he recounts a very different Central Valley, a very great different valley than what we experience here today. We still see pockets of it, but for the most part, we really don't see the kind of grassland and plains area that a lot of the settlers talked about, the great herds of antelope and tule elk that were roaming. They talk about during the the Pacific flyway seasons where it would be dark with birds. So we've lost about 94 to 96% of a lot of our waterways and of course our grasslands. But anyway, my point is, here where we live in Yolo County, we live in an ecotone. That transitional zone for animals to go out and graze and get food in the great grasslands and plains of California. But also we sit in another location that's M262C, and also the great interior coast ranges. So we have a lot of chaparral areas, or our scrub land. So again, animals have an opportunity not only to graze and browse out here in the Central Valley, but it also goes in the coastal ranges. Also, this is another coastal range, and then of course all the way over to the coast itself. It also has great opportunities. A lot of the plants, or excuse me, the animals in our area. They can also go into the delta and get into riparian habitats and the like. So for instance, drought seasons can find their way near water. So plants and animals in Yolo County have a great diversity primarily because of their location in this ecotone. Ecotones are really key into making ecosystems vibrant and diverse and providing lots of food and necessary energy. Now the problem with California is, one of the things that we know that we have is we got this great freeway, I-5, that travels down the state like this. And basically from Redding all the way down to Bakersfield and beyond, we have this tremendous diversity of ecosystems. But the problem is, because of all the development, whether it be agricultural, whether it be homes or commercial buildings or the such, we are breaking down those ecotones. We are eliminating or changing the face of the ecotones and animal corridors, so the animals here, for instance in Yolo County, aren't able to take advantage of any plains or grasslands because they're gone. They're just not there anymore. And so when again we take a look at, let me go back here. As we go into Yolo County right here, we have chopped it all up, primarily because of development, agricultural and otherwise, and there are very few corridors left. So what we need to do is we need to continue to work with organizations like SLUs to reestablish animal corridors so they can go from their ecotones like oak woodland out to areas to graze like the Great Valley, or up into the chaparral and browse on chamise and madrone and a variety of other plants that they like to browse. And they can still make it to waterways to get water. So the key to understanding ecosystems is to understand there are all of these little biomes and ecotones that provide pathways or corridors for animals to get what they need, and also for them to support whatever phase of life that they're in. I hope that makes some kind of sense to you. We'll talk a little bit more about it, especially when the SLUs folks come to visit us and they talk to us about our restoration project. We're going to continue on this series of lessons on ecosystems, and we're going to be taking a look at the different flow charts or energy flow charts called trophic levels. And those trophic levels will give us a better understanding of how we can capture energy within the ecosystems. So until the next lesson, I hope this helped, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks. Bye.